Good morning, and welcome to this event. My hope is that you have been to several of the amazing events of this weekend so far and are now familiar with the wonderfulness that is about to happen on stage. But my name is Elizabeth Catlin, and I am part of the festival organizing committee. This year's festival is made possible by the generous support of our festival sponsors, which include Brattleboro Community Television, Jenny Altschuler and Barry Green, the Stepansky Family Trust, the Vermont Humanities Council, and poets and writers. And we would also like to thank our advertisers that you can find in your program, and we encourage you to support them. You've probably heard this already this weekend, but this festival is run entirely by volunteers. It has very real expenses, although it is free to you. And so we encourage you to make a donation in one of our donation boxes or using the QR code that you can find in the program and on our website. This is the moment to take your cell phone out and make sure the ringer is off, mostly because we are recording this event so that people who are not able to attend can watch it in the future. And the authors are usually pretty cool about cell phones going off, but the recording, it's not the nicest looked. So thank you for doing that. You are welcome to take pictures, though, during the event and post them on social media or share them with your friends. We are always excited to have everybody know about the wealth of offerings we have here every year. And this is our 24th year, which is kind of amazing. So this particular panel is sponsored by the MWKABG book group. If you know, you know. And our two authors that we're lucky enough to have today are Alison Espach and Marcy Dermansky. It is a delight to have them with us because they have compatibly skeptical takes on hetero romance in America, I would say. If you have read Hot Air and The Wedding People, you already know that Marcy and Alison contrast the sort of persistent fantasy of pairing off with the wildly uneven realities of who we are within and outside those relationships. I think it is fair to say that both Alison and Marcy are unafraid to look at the darker parts of being alive and human. Each has her own style, and each is funny in a specific way. And it's so tempting to focus on the books they have, but each of these authors' back catalogs are so worth your time and attention. So I encourage you to read their earlier works, as well as the two that they'll be talking about today. So Marcy's going to go first. Marcy Dermansky is the author of 6 critically acclaimed novels, including Hurricane Girl and Bad Marie. And her newest book, Hot Air, began with a writing prompt, became a short story, then grew into a novel about 4 adults and several other characters whose decision-making causes you to simultaneously shake your head and nod in recognition. Marcy's short fiction has been widely published and anthologized, appearing in McSweeney's, Guernica, the Indiana Review, Lenny Letter, and elsewhere. She lives in New Jersey with her daughter. Please help me welcome Marcy Dermansky.
Hi. Microphone okay? We're good? Well, I'll just start to say that I've had such the nicest weekend in Brattleboro. It's been such a pleasure. I got to go to No Kings yesterday. I went to Ocean Vuong's event. I've drank wonderful coffee. I've looked at foliage. It's just so nice, and thank you for having me. And this is such an incredible space to be in. I would love to just start. Instead of talking about what my novel's about, if I read the first scene, it's going to tell you everything you need to know, and that's easier for me. I'm terrible at describing what my book is about. So I'll read the opening scene of Hot Air. Okay. Joni was not certain how the date was going. Thank you. That's just what I like in an audience. Okay. She had not been on a date for a very long time. Not since her divorce 7 years ago. And then, of course, not during her 10 years of marriage. She'd never been on a proper date with her ex-husband, even before they were married. He had just sort of worn her down, so clearly in love with her. And that was a big chunk of her life, her marriage. Years and years and years of her life, stolen. Not only the opportunity to date, but to lead her life, to spend her days the way she would have liked, instead of always trying to placate someone else. She did, of course, have a marvelous child named Lucy. So she was on a date. Joni had met him not on an app, but in real life, at a block party on a very fancy block around the corner from her not-that-fancy apartment. Her daughter had a friend who lived on this block. At the party, Joni had gotten pleasantly drunk and accepted a hit from a joint, even though she did not like to smoke pot, because she figured, why not? Some people made friends through their dogs. Joni had met people through her daughter. The man she met had a son the same age as her daughter, and her daughter had said that this boy wasn't awful. Johnny texted her the next day asking her out, and when Joni replied that she did not have a babysitter, he wrote back that she should come to the house, bring her daughter, and the kids could watch a movie in the basement. He promised a nice meal, and Joni loved free dinners. Nothing, of course, could ever happen between the two of them because of their names, Joni and Johnny. Joni realized very quickly that she was not attracted to Johnny. He was not unattractive, attractive even. He had money too, which was important after being married for so long to a man who did not. He liked good movies. He read books. He made her dinner. She knew, however, that she was not attracted to him because after the meal he had kissed her. They'd gone outside to watch the sunset. The sky had turned pink. The light sparkled over the lawn onto the swimming pool that Joni did not know that he had. She returned the kiss. It started out fine, and then became unpleasant, oppressive even, with Johnny's tongue in her mouth, his arms wrapped around her tightly so that it was difficult to extricate herself. It was a kiss that did not end. Joni was realizing that she would have to forcibly end this kiss because she would soon require oxygen when a hot air balloon came veering down towards Johnny's very large backyard. "Holy fuck," Johnny yelled, letting her go, looking up at the sky while Joni gulped for air. That hot air balloon was heading straight for the swimming pool. It was crazy. Joni decided that she was never going to kiss that man again. This made her sad because during the meal she'd begun to imagine their life together. And already had come crashing down like a hot air balloon. She'd thought about the flowers she would plant in the yard, the coffee she would drink in the morning, sitting outside in one of the Adirondack chairs beneath the oak tree. The basement had a fully equipped playroom with a floor-to-ceiling movie screen. She would be a stepmother, which would be tricky, but how hard could that be? It would be nice to have a playmate for her daughter, but now she would never find out. There was a man and a woman in the basket of the hot air balloon careening from the sky, and they were screaming, not out of fear, but in anger. They seemed to hate each other. They were all dressed up. "Make way, we're coming down. I will kill you if we don't die." This was startling, to say the least. "They're going to land in the pool," Johnny said. He and Joni ran for the pool, but the hot air balloon landed on the lawn right at the edge of the pool. "Thank God," Johnny yelled. "We're okay," the man yelled. And then the balloon tipped over, falling into the pool with a poignant splash. The man went under head first. Joni watched the bottoms of his leather shoes go under last. She'd never seen anything like this. Joni was so grateful not to be kissing Johnny anymore, and a man had fallen into the swimming pool and he needed saving. Joni dove in. It was mid-May. The water was cold. She grabbed the man, putting her arms around his chest, and brought him up to the surface, kicking with her legs. And then at the end of the pool was Johnny and the woman in the evening gown, who had somehow climbed out of the basket onto dry land, and they were helping her pull the man out of the water. He began spouting water, not dead, not in need of CPR, which was a good thing because Joni did not know how to give CPR. He was wearing a tuxedo. Joni pulled herself out of the pool on her own while Johnny and the woman from the hot air balloon tended to the not drowned man. Joni could not believe how alive she felt. She felt amazing. She'd saved a man's life. She had jumped into cold water. It was a tremendous combination. She could feel the grin on her face. She saw Johnny looking up at her and her smile extended to him. Maybe she would try kissing him again. Maybe she'd been wrong. That was incredible, she said. Joni wondered about her daughter, wondered if she had seen the hot air balloon go into the pool, but the kids were in the windowless basement watching the third Harry Potter movie. And that's the opening. Okay. Right. So it's really improbable for a hot air balloon to crash into somebody's backyard. And a lot of people, I mean, Elizabeth already said, how did I get the idea for this book? And it's slightly embarrassing. Every novel that I write comes from a different place. And this novel literally came when I was having a stuck period of writing, and a friend sent out a newsletter. She's also a writer. And in the newsletter, she just sent out some random writing prompts. And the writing prompt was, have a hot air balloon crash down on a first date. So I did it. I wrote a short story, and that's the beginning of the short story. The first chapter is probably the longest chapter. It's about 20 pages long, and it goes on, and you find out that the man in the hot air balloon was actually the first boy she ever kissed at summer camp. Someone was asking me at dinner last night about coincidences and writing, and I just love coincidences. I just use them all the time, so that was a big coincidence in this book. And from there are 4 points of view in this novel. There's Joni, there's Johnny, there's Jonathan, who's in the hot air balloon, and there's Julia. And that's also, they all have names that begin with J. And what I learned later is that's very confusing to some people, and it didn't even occur to me. And I don't have like a big reason about why, but it just really pleased me. It was just so silly for them all to have Jonathan names. And I think when I'm writing, a lot of people, when you write, we think about who our audience is, and my first audience is strangely always me. Like if I don't like what I'm writing, it never seems to turn out well. So if I please myself, if I like make myself smile, I'm like, okay, I'll just do it. And then I do it, and then I think about it later. And so that's how this book started, with that chapter. And I sent it out as a short story. My agent loved it, and he submitted it to the New Yorker, and it got rejected from the New Yorker with a nice note. And he said, turn this into a novel. And I said, no way, this is kind of dumb. And I didn't. And I literally sat on it for a year, and I worked on something else, and that wasn't clicking, which is just the worst. And then I made a new friend, and kind of what happened is it submerged itself into the book, is she invited 2 people to come write in her house. She had a great big house with a swimming pool in the backyard, and we would go to her house twice a week, and we would write. And then we would order sushi for lunch. It was so fun. It's the best writing workshop ever. I recommend you host people. My house isn't big enough for that. And so I pulled out the short story because I really wanted to go write at this woman's house, and I needed something to work on. So I said, okay, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to give it like 3 months. I'm just going to write this really fast because I'm tired of wasting my time. And I wrote a draft of this in 3 months. And so when I sat down, I just moved on to the next character. The first chapter is Joni. So then I was like, okay, I'll write Johnny. And so if any of you are writers, multiple point of view, which is also in Alison's book, you're going to find out, it's just so much fun because then you just jump from character to character, and it just moves your plot along. So it just makes writing a lot easier in my mind. And I don't do it in all of my books, but I've done it in several. And so that's how the book started. And I think a lot of times about my writing process, and it's different. I've written 6 novels, and this is the only novel that I wrote from a writing prompt. I wrote another novel that was it was another writing exercise that I gave to myself when I was stuck. When I'm stuck, I just invent things. And I decided I was going to write a Haruki Murakami novel, because he's one of my favorite authors. And so my novel, The Red Car, was literally my having reread a bunch of Murakami, which always gives me pleasure. And he's always writing about extraordinary men who think they're not extraordinary, and things happen to them that shouldn't actually happen in real life, and they go on journeys. And so that's my novel, The Red Car, which is about an American woman who's not extraordinary, but is extraordinary, and crazy things happen to her, and a red car that gets smashed up miraculously gets fixed, and there's no explanation of why. And so I wrote a writing prompt novel. I wrote a Murakami novel. It's just fun. Writing's just fun, and I wish that every time I wrote a book that I would know how to write the next book. But like, I'm never going to go writing Catherine Chung's house again. That was a 1-book process. And so I'm working on my next book. I'm actually writing it not in a cafe, which I've written. My novel, Very Nice, was written all in cafes. And now I'm working in my own home, which is really tricky sometimes. But I like being in a room with my cats. And so they encourage me. And I'm doing really well on time. I think I've got like about 10 more minutes. What else do we want to talk about writing? Later we're going to have questions, but I don't want to put too much pressure on Alison, so I'm going to think of a few more things to say. There are more points of view in this book, which is really fun. Structure is a really fun thing to do. And in this novel, which a lot of it's about, by the way, one of the characters is about a single mother. I like to write fiction. I've never tried to write memoir, and I'm never going to because I don't want people to know my life. I don't want to say, did this happen to you? But it happens anyway, because then people read your novel, and there's a single mother character in this book, and I'm a single mother. And I'm like, well, I've never jumped into a pool and saved somebody from a swimming pool, so this novel is all fiction. But I did get to use some of my experience. And one of the fun things about this book is there are 4 main points of view, but I also throw in a couple bonus, and one of them is Lucy. So this is the first novel where I ever wrote from the point of view of a child. I wrote from an 8-year-old point of view, and it was just so fun to go into her head and see what she was thinking. And I was like, oh, this came out nicely. Like, I was just pleased with myself. Here I am praising myself in front of you, which is a little goofy. And I also wrote about, the writing process is really interesting because when I turned this novel in, first you turn it into your agent, he like has you fix it up, and then you send it into your editor, and she's like, I want something more, but I don't know what it is. I'm like, thank you. And what it was is I knew what wasn't there. And Vivian there's a character in this book because it's about great wealth. The people who fall into the swimming pool are billionaires. And I didn't know when I was writing a book with billionaire characters that this would now be our moment for billionaires. And I was actually asked to write an essay about it and sometimes writers are asked to write essays to promote their books. And I couldn't write anything coherent about why billionaires are bad. I was like, well, it's in my book. So I didn't write the essay, but so there's some billionaires, and one of the characters is a personal assistant named Vivian. And Vivian, she only has 2 sections, and they're kind of the strongest sections because she's really looking at everybody and she's judging everybody. And I had her judge the single mother, which was kind of funny because that was sort of me. I judged myself. And she judged her employers. And I also, sometimes people think about research, and I don't write historical fiction, so I think research in my life can often be TV watching. And over the course of the pandemic, I think my daughter and I watched Modern Family. There are 10 seasons of Modern Family. And I think we watched it 3 times. I was so sick of that show in the end. But in the end, Vivian is an adopted orphan from Vietnam living with Christian family. And I got to put Lily from Modern Family into my book and compare them. And I was just so thrilled. I was so thrilled to put my TV watching into the novel. So if you watch a lot of TV, you can just pat yourself on the back and say it's going to help your writing. And I think that's good. I would love to hear about Alison because I read The Wedding People and I loved it. And it's also very much about somebody who's not so wealthy who runs into some really wealthy people. And wealthy people are different. They make offers and they make promises. It happens in my novel. The billionaires make promises to Joni and Lucy, and they don't necessarily follow through. So it's really interesting. Thanks.
Thank you. Alison Espach. Okay, so The Wedding People is a hugely popular novel, which was a read with Jenna pick and a New York Times bestseller and pretty much in everyone's beach bag last summer. But Alison is also the author of Notes on Your Sudden Disappearance, which is just a brilliant book, as well as The Adults. She has written for McSweeney's, Vogue, Outside, Lit Hub, and Joyland, among others. And she lives and teaches creative writing in Rhode Island. Welcome, Alison.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay? Oh. It's a really great honor to be here with Marcy. I was a big Marcy Dermansky fan. Is that how you say your last name? Yeah. Never said it out loud before. The past 10 years, I've read a bunch of her books and have never run into her at any writing conference or anything. Yeah. Not even on social media, I don't think. Yeah, so
we'll change that.
Yeah. We can leave here and be social media friends. Yeah, the truest form of friendship. Yeah. And really nice to be here in Brattleboro. And just spend my last weekend before I have a baby somewhere not in my house. So this has been a really, really great treat. Thank you all for coming today. I have noticed that I get out of breath just sitting still now. So I don't think that's great for doing a reading, but bear with me if that happens. So I'm also just going to start by reading from the beginning of the book. I think it gives you a sense of what's going on. And if there's time, I might read another small section that will really lay out the larger premise of the book. And I'll say a few things about those two sections. I will also be looking at my phone just to keep myself on time here. I'm not texting. The hotel looks exactly as Phoebe hoped. It sits on the edge of the cliff like an old and stately dog, patiently waiting for her arrival. She can't see the ocean behind it, but she knows it's there, the same way she could pull into her driveway and feel her husband in his office typing his manuscript. Love was an invisible wire connecting them always. Phoebe steps out of the cab. A man in burgundy approaches with such seriousness the moment feels as if it has been choreographed long ago. It makes her certain that what she is doing is right. "Good evening," the man says. "Welcome to the Cornwall Inn. May I take your luggage?" "I don't have any luggage," Phoebe says. When she left St. Louis, it felt important to leave everything behind: the husband, the house, the luggage. It was time to move on, which she knew because that was what they had all agreed to last year at the end of the divorce hearing. Phoebe was so stunned by the finality of their conversation, by the way her husband said, "Okay, take care now," like he was the mailman, wishing her well. She could not bring herself to do a single thing after except climb in bed and drink gin and tonics and listen to the sound of the refrigerator making ice. Not that there was anywhere to go. This was mid-lockdown, when she only left the house for gin and toilet paper and taught her virtual classes in the same black blouse every day, because what else were people supposed to wear? By the time lockdown was over, she couldn't remember. But now Phoebe stands before a 19th century Newport hotel in an emerald silk dress, the only item in her closet she can honestly say she still loves, probably because it was the one thing she had never worn. She and her husband never did anything fancy enough for it. They were professors. They were easygoing, relaxed, so comfortable by the fire, with the little cat on their laps. They liked regular things, whatever was on tap, whatever was on TV, whatever. Sorry. Big suspense. What do they like? Whatever shirt looked the most normal, because wasn't that the point of clothing? To prove that you were normal, to prove that every day, no matter what, you were a person who could put on a shirt. But that morning, before she got on the plane, Phoebe woke and knew she was no longer normal. Yet she made toast, took a shower, dried her hair, gathered her lecture notes for her second day of the fall semester, opened her closet and looked at all the clothes she once bought simply because they looked like shirts a professor should wear to work. Rows of solid-colored blouses, the female versions of things her husband wore. She pulled out a gray one, held it up in front of the mirror, but could not bring herself to put it on. Could not go to work and stand at the office printer and hold her face in a steady expression of interest while her colleague talked at length about the surprising importance of cheese in medieval theology. Instead, she slipped on the emerald dress, the gold heels from her wedding, the thick pearls her husband had lain across her eyes like a blindfold on their wedding night. She got on a plane, drank an impressively good gin and tonic, and it was so nice and cool down her throat, she hardly felt her blisters exiting the plane. "Right this way, ma'am," the man in burgundy says. Phoebe gives the man $20, and he seems surprised to be tipped for doing nothing, but to Phoebe, it is not nothing. It's been a long time since a man has stood up immediately upon seeing her get out of a car. Years since her husband emerged from his office to greet her when she got home. It is nice to be stood for, to feel like her arrival is an important event, to hear her heels click as she walks up the old brick entranceway. She always wanted to make this sound, to feel grand and dignified when walking into a lecture hall, but her university was made of carpet. She goes up the stairs, passes the big black lanterns and the granite lions guarding the doors. She walks through the curtains into the lobby, and this feels right too, like stepping back in time to an older world that was probably not better, but at least was heavily draped in velvet. Then she sees the check-in line. It's so long, the kind of line she expected to see at the airport and not at a Victorian mansion overlooking the ocean. Yet there the line is, stretching all the way through the lobby and past the historic oak staircase. The people in it look wrong too, wearing windbreakers and jeans and sneakers, the normal shirts Phoebe used to wear. They look comically ordinary next to the velvet drapes and the gilt-framed portraits of bearded men lining the walls. They look like solid, modern people, tethered to the earth by their titanium-strength suitcases. Some are talking on their phones. Some are reading off their phones, like they're prepared to be in this line forever, and maybe they are. Maybe they don't have families anymore either. It's tempting for Phoebe to think like this now, to believe that everybody is as alone as she is. But they're not alone. They stand in pairs of 2 or 3, some with linked arms, some with single hands resting on a back. They're happy, which Phoebe knows, because every so often, one of them announces how happy they are. "Jim," an old man says, opening up his arms like a bear. "I'm so happy to see you." "Hey, Grandpa Jim," a younger man says back, because it seems everyone in line is named Jim. The Jims exchange violent hugs and hellos. "Where's Uncle Jim? Already on the course?" Even the young woman working the front desk seems happy, so dedicated to looking each guest deeply in the eye, asking them why they're here, even though they all say the same thing. And so she replies with the same thing. "Oh, you're here for the wedding. How wonderful." She sounds genuinely excited about the wedding, and maybe she is. Maybe she's still so young that she believes everybody else's wedding is somehow about her. That's how Phoebe always felt when she was young, worrying about what dress to wear for a month, even though she sat in the outer orbit of every wedding she attended. Okay, so that's the opening. You get a sense of Phoebe, kind of what she went through that morning, why she's here, why she's arrived at this hotel, kind of her expectations of grandeur, and then she runs into the wedding people, all standing in a line, and she's starting to get a sense that, okay, there's a big wedding going on here. I'm trying to remember correctly. I do believe I always wanted there to be a wedding in this novel. I know I started with this, when I started writing this book, I started with this idea of just like a woman entering a hotel, knowing that she's going to be at odds with whatever vibe is happening in the hotel. But it just took me a few tries to figure out, well, what is that? Like, why is she at odds with the vibe of the hotel? And I always really wanted to write about weddings. I used to work at weddings. I was one of those photo booth attendants at weddings that you might see now. I don't know if it's been a while actually since I've been to a wedding, so I don't know if those photo booth attendants have become obsolete. But I started this back in 2009 when they were just like starting to show up at weddings, and people were very confused, and they would always come up to me and be like, is this the thing at the mall? Like, are we supposed to get in there? Like, are we gonna get charged? So I was there to just kind of usher them in, give them the silly hats, make sure nothing went wrong, but I was always dressed like a wedding guest. We were told to dress for the event. So basically, by the end of the evening or over the course of the evening, I would end up talking to a lot of people at the wedding because, I looked like a very sad, lonely wedding guest who had no one to talk to all night long. And that attracted other sad, lonely wedding guests who needed me to be their conversation partner. And I thought this was so fun, so great. I got to hear everything about the wedding that the outsider at the wedding wouldn't tell anyone else, only me, because I didn't matter. I'm just this random person. And so that was the perspective I always wanted to write, that kind of the person who didn't matter to the wedding, right? Me. I felt like I got the real dirt. I got to see the people come out of the photo booth and be like, who sees these photos? And I was like, I think the bride and groom. And they're like, well, we're not married. Can you erase these photos somehow? People would just tell me things. And so when I thought of this hotel and Phoebe coming and realizing there was a wedding here, I really drew on that point of view. I wouldn't say I drew on like the actual experiences. Like I don't honestly remember enough of them to even use them. But just that perspective of being the person the stranger at the wedding who doesn't matter. So everyone feels like Phoebe is their relief valve, the person they can go to and say, well, this is what I really feel about my fiance's beard, right? I do not like it. But I'm supposed to be the happy bride, and I can't say that to anyone who's invested in the wedding, only you, stranger, right? So that was the perspective, I still struggled, though, knowing that was the perspective. I was like, well, why is Phoebe here? Became the question. Every time I was writing that, the front desk person who I ended up calling Pauline, she's like, why are you here? Why are you here? Why are you here? It took me a few tries to figure out the answer to that question. I'll say a little bit more about that once I'm done reading the scene. But the scene I'm going to read is the one where you find out why she's here. And just a heads up, there's a little bit of suicidal ideation in here. So just prepare for that. Okay, so Phoebe's finally made it to the checkout line. So what brings you to the Cornwall Inn? Even though she knew this question was coming, Phoebe is startled by it. When she imagined herself here, she didn't imagine herself having to speak to anybody. She's simply out of practice. This is my happy place, Phoebe blurts out. It's not the entire truth, but it's not a lie. Oh, so you've stayed with us before, Pauline asks. No, Phoebe says. 2 years ago, Phoebe saw the hotel advertised in some magazine, the kind she only ever read while waiting in the fertility clinic. She looked at the pictures of the Victorian canopy bed overlooking the ocean, and she thought, who actually plans their vacations by looking through a travel magazine? She felt angry at these people, not that she knew anybody who did things like that. Yet days later, when her therapist asked her to close her eyes and describe her happy place, she pictured herself on that canopy bed because she could only imagine herself happy in a place she had never been, a bed she had never slept in. Well, this is a happy place indeed. Phoebe picks up the key. It's already been too much conversation, too much pretending to be normal, and she's not paying $800 just to stay here and pretend to be normal. She could have easily done that at home. She feels herself grow weary, but Pauline has so many more questions. Would she like to add a spa package? Would she like to book a visit with her in-house tarot reader? Would she like a normal pillow or a coconut pillow? What's a coconut pillow? Phoebe asks. A pillow, Pauline says, with coconut in it. Are pillows better that way? Phoebe asks, with coconut inside them? That's what her husband would have asked, a bad habit of hers, a product of being married for a decade, always imagining what her husband might say, even when he's not around, especially when he's not around. Phoebe didn't think she'd end up being a woman like this, but if the last few years have taught her anything, it's that you really can't ever know who you're going to become. Pillows are much better that way, Pauline says. Trust me, we'll have one sent right up. Phoebe walks into the elevator, feels relief when the doors start to close. Finally, to be getting away from the wedding people, to be doing something for a change, to have a key to a place that is not her house. Hold the elevator, a woman calls out. Phoebe knows it's the bride before she sees her. She yells like she deserves this elevator, but nobody deserves anything, not even the bride. Phoebe presses the button to close the doors, but the bride slides a hand between them. They don't bounce open like they're supposed to, maybe because the Cornwall was built in 1864. An old hotel has no mercy, not even for the bride. Fuck, the bride shouts. Oh God, Phoebe says. She pries the doors back open, then stares at the bride's hand in disbelief. You're bleeding. The bride holds up the gash across the back of her knuckles like a child and takes the tissue Phoebe offers without saying thank you. Phoebe presses the button and the doors close again. The women don't say anything as the bride politely bleeds into the tissue and they begin to ascend. Phoebe hears the bride try to steady her breath, watches the tissue darken. I'm really sorry, Phoebe says. I didn't realize that would happen. Oh, I'm sure it's fine. It'll be fine, the bride struggles to say. She clears her throat. So are you in Gary's family? No, Phoebe says. Are you in my family? You don't know who's in your own family, Phoebe asks. The question makes Phoebe want to laugh, and it's a strange feeling. The first time she's wanted to laugh in months, years maybe, because how does the bride not know her own family? Phoebe knew everybody in her family. She had no choice. It was so small, just Phoebe and her father, tiny enough to fit inside his old fishing cabin. I have a very large family, the bride says, like it's a problem. Well, I'm not in your family. You have to be in one of our families. No, Phoebe says, I'm not in any family. But everybody is here for the wedding. I made sure of it, the bride eyes the gift bag she gave Phoebe, confused. This has to be some kind of mistake. There's no mistake, Phoebe says. This is Phoebe's happy place, the place Phoebe has chosen out of all the possible places. How dare the bride make Phoebe feel like she's not supposed to be here? But if you're not here for the wedding, then what are you here for? The bride asks in a much lower pitch, as if her real voice has finally emerged. Because now in this private space with a person not attending the wedding, the bride doesn't have to be the bride. She can speak however she wants, and so can Phoebe. Phoebe is nobody, and the only good thing about being nobody is that she can now say whatever the fuck she wants, even to the bride. I'm here to kill myself, Phoebe says. She says it without drama or emotion, as if it's just a fact, because that's what it is. She waits for the truth of it to stun the bride into an awkward silence, but the bride looks confused. What did you just say? The bride asks. I said I'm here to kill myself, Phoebe repeats, more firmly this time. It feels good to say it out loud. If she can't say it out loud, then she won't be able to do it, and she has to do it. She's decided, she's come all this way. She feels relief as the doors begin to open, but the bride presses the button to close them. No, the bride says. No, you definitely cannot kill yourself. This is my wedding week. Your wedding is a week? Well, like 6 days if you want to be technical about it. That's a long wedding. A week is actually pretty standard now, the bride says, with a tone that makes Phoebe feel old. And people are coming a long way to be here, but Phoebe doesn't care. This is the most important week of my life, the bride pleads. Same, Phoebe says. So I wrote that scene pretty early on. After a few attempts at writing what I thought was like maybe a more fun plot line. I was really determined to make this a fun book, whatever that means. I just kept demanding it of myself as a writer. I felt like my second novel, Notes on Your Sudden Disappearance, and the first book, but the second one in particular, I drew a lot on experiences losing my brother when we were teenagers. And so it was a kind of a 10-year process of being in a darker space. And when I was done, I was like, why would I ever do that again? I'm just going to write a fun book, a hotel book, a wedding book. Phoebe's not ever going to go to work again. She's there to assassinate someone, or maybe she's there to have a sexy affair. Like, I just really wanted it to be not what I do. And then I wrote that scene. And I was like, this is exactly how I would ruin a book. Why did I do that? And I couldn't undo it because I knew it was the plot. Because once I wrote it, I realized that is the opposite of a wedding. Like, to me, that is the exact thing that the bride would fear, which is just sadness, like other people's sadness ruining her perfection, her vision of happiness. So I put it down for actually a few years because I thought, nope, no one wants to read that book. I truly thought, I was never planning on working on it again until I reread it when trying to look for new material. And I had a new relationship to that scene, right? 3 years later, or 4 years later, whatever it was. I found myself interested in the characters. I was reading it like a stranger. I forgot what I wrote. And I realized that I was the bride. I was like saying this book must be fun. Like, there cannot be sadness in this book. There cannot be darkness. Have a fun time writing this fun book, which really was the voice of Lila. And so at that moment, I realized that, it's about these two characters who are opposites, but it's really actually also about the competing voices in ourselves that say, be real, be honest, whatever you're feeling, let it out. And the other person inside you that says, do not tell anyone anything you're feeling ever. And I thought that's kind of what the book is about. It's not necessarily a sad book. It's really about battling that tension. And I wanted to keep writing until I figured out what happened. I do not outline. I don't recommend it.
Yeah.
It takes a lot longer, but I find I need that suspense for myself as a writer to not quite know how these two people, how they're going to deal with their collision in that opening scene. So I don't know how I'm doing on time. I think that's about good. So why don't I turn it back to Elizabeth?
So do either of you have questions for each other you'd like to ask, or we'll turn it over to the audience? If not?
No, I just had a thought because I don't outline either. And what I love about learning about, I didn't know Alison's process and how it took. It was so interesting, is that she doesn't outline at all, but as a reader, you don't know these things, and how it all works out just felt inevitable. And so that's kind of amazing, you know.
Yeah, thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, I don't outline, but I do know the shape of the book. I knew that the book was going to start when Phoebe walks into the hotel, and I knew it was going to end when she left the hotel, which was a pretty good container for me. I felt like that carried me a long way through the book, knowing that she was going to leave the hotel. What is she going to be like by then? I originally called the book The Wedding Night because I thought it would take place over one night. And then I was like, there are too many feelings in this book. We cannot settle them in one night. And so I stretched it out a bit to make it so that Phoebe could experience a real transformation.
I have a question about, it seems to me, not being a writer myself, that the process of writing is a fairly, singular interior process. And I'm always struck at the festival how it might feel kind of weird to be sitting up talking about your book to an audience of people, which is not your day job. And I just wonder if you each could speak to the experience of how your books have been received in the world, sort of what's come back at you from your readers, whether it was surprising or what you expected.
Okay.
I feel like I just talked a lot.
Okay, so I'm gonna go. Okay. So one really fun thing that happened with Hot Air, which is my 6th novel, is at my first event. It was at Books Are Magic, and Emma Straub was the woman who interviewed me, and she kind of raised her hand and she said, "I'm a completist," and what that meant is she'd read all of my books, and it was just like the most gratifying thing. So I've been kind of riding on this completist wave, this book. And if you're not a completist, you can still be one. So it's like you can all have aspirations. And so it's just a really brave thing, I think, to be a writer. After college, I got a job, and that was just not what I wanted to do. So I went to grad school. And then after I went to grad school, I had to get a job again. I was like, what's going on? So, I wrote my first novel, the first novel process was just I'm going to write and I'm going to write and I'm going to write and I'm not going to go out for dinner and I'm not going to go to parties because I'm working full time and I'm writing. And then when you sell that first book, it's like, oh, okay, I can really do this. And so it's like a crazy way to live. There's so much insecurity, and it's also just so great. It's just both. And that's how I feel. And I just love hearing from people who've read my book. And it's just really fun, and I love meeting other writers, and I think I answered that question. I hope so.
Yeah, I think of this book as a really different process for me as a writer. Like I mentioned, the second novel, Notes on Your Sudden Disappearance, and I think my first novel was like this too, but I felt it was very much like a solitary endeavor and something that kept me inside dimly lit rooms all the time by myself as a writer. I wish I could be a cafe writer. My life would be so much more beautiful. But I really need to be in an isolation chamber. And that kind of wears on you over time, especially if you're working another full-time job. You don't want to spend your weekend in an isolation chamber just making up people. And so for this book, I decided, well, one of the other reasons I stopped working on it was because I had never stayed at a luxury hotel before, and I felt like a fraud. Just being like, the curtains are so expensive and the rug is so, like, would there be a rug? Probably not. I don't think rich people like carpets. But I didn't know. So I needed to go, and every time I looked up the prices, I was like, no way. Wow. So I actually applied for a grant at my college. Every year they give out a research grant. And I never thought it would apply to me, but I was like, you know what? I actually stopped writing this book because I've never been to this place before. And so I put together like the world's most professional grant about staying at a luxury hotel. I was like, I'm going to get this. I have to convince them this is a real thing. And I got it. So I went, and that really did make the difference. Like, I'm not just saying this in case they ever watch it. That first night, someone knocked on the door, and who works at the hotel, and asked to turn down the room. And I had never heard this before as a Hilton loyalist. So I was like, what? And he's like, I'm here to turn down the room. Like, get you ready for bed. and I was like, oh, that is a great service. Like, I can't believe I've been missing out on this. Please come in. Like, I, in my imagination was like imagining me getting in bed and like, it's like saying like nice things about the world and petting my head, But of course he's just closing the curtains and like turning down the lights and the bedspread, but that was an opening up moment for me where I thought, that's why I'm here. And I spent the rest of I realized like this is going to be a big scene in the book for Phoebe, who hates being alone at night. Like, to have someone come get you ready for bed, like, what's better than that? And so that really just ushered in this new phase of like putting myself in places. I was sitting at the hotel lobby writing, and I took surfing lessons to, learn how to surf and write about it. And that was very fun. So if you've been a writer for a long time and feel like you've been in isolation, you can do it differently sometimes. And so thinking about this as a book that really like brought me back into the world, as opposed to all my other books, which I felt like created more of a divide, has been a really pleasant part of the experience, and just hearing from readers as well.
Awesome. Are there questions from the audience? And if you do have one, I think we have a mic there and a mic here, and it would be helpful for the recording if you would be willing to go to the mic, or I can repeat the question. Okay, so the question related to the audiobook version of the novel, and I hope I get this right, whether you as the author have some control over the narrator and the sound of their voice, or whether it's just someone else's decision and you're stuck with it. Okay, so why don't we take the audiobook question and go with that?
Okay. So I have an interesting thing in that I've never listened to any of my audiobooks because it makes me too nervous. And usually, for Hot Air, they actually gave me a choice. They made a decision on their own. With one novel, I had many points of views, and they did different readers for each point of view. And for Hot Air, apparently, they decided to get one female voice that sounded slightly androgynous. And I said, that sounds fine. And I listened to 4 voice files, and I picked one. And I hope I picked right. I don't know, because I've never listened to my novels, and I don't think I will. So, but it's nice to have a choice. I know for some authors, which is kind of amazing, they will have the same reader for every book, and that's very, very cool, I think. But that's not been my experience.
I actually had the same exact experience.
Really?
4 little audio clips that are, I think they're about like 3 or 4 minutes long.
Yeah.
And you listen to them read different parts of the book and maybe different voices that might be important to the book. And then you choose, which I don't know. I think whoever I've chosen has always been the person. So I think there's actually a lot of control there. And I also don't listen. I have tried listening a few times, but it just feels embarrassing.
Yeah, it really
It feels like
does.
someone reading your diary aloud to you.
Yeah.
And it's hard to do, which is unfortunate because I do love to listen to audiobooks, and I've heard that they've done a great job.
Yeah, I listened to the Wedding People's audio. It was really good.
Oh, you listened
Yeah, I
to
did actually listen to it. So there you go. They did a really wonderful job.
Did you like the way that she did all the voices?
Yeah, it was actually like one of the first audiobooks I ever listened to.
Oh, wow.
And so yeah, it really was really
okay.
great. Yeah. So yeah.
It's good to know.
Go ahead in the back. Okay, so I heard I'm wondering about your editing process, and then I didn't catch the rest of it. Okay, so whether your agent was involved in the editing process or whether it was you and the editor, yeah?
You can go first.
Sure. Change it up. Yeah, my agent always is a very heavy editorial presence in all of my books. Even from the very beginning, when I pitched her The Adults, our first conversation, she was like, I want to represent you, but we're going to have to work on this book for a long time. Which is, I'm sure you can imagine if you're a writer, you're like, but I just finished working on the book. That's why I queried you. But she was like, no. So that's always been our experience. And so with every book, I give my agent the book when it's done, in the sense that I can't think of what else to do to it, but I know it's not ready for the editor. And we often spend half a year, just getting it ready to be pitched to the publisher. And then the editor, of course, takes it over for another year and a half. So usually when I'm like, I'm done, I never have to think about this book again, there's always like a 3-year process just on the other side of that celebration.
Yeah, that sounds really similar to my experience. Always the agent reads it first. He always has something to do. It's usually not very concrete. It's just like ideas, but I have to do more work. I have to get it through him. And then I've had the same editor for 3 novels, which has just been really great. And I think I told you, she said she wanted something more for this book. And one of the things that she did, which was really annoying, is she's like, oh, I want a twist in this novel. And I said, a twist? And I got really annoyed with her. And I was like, not going to write a twist. And then they're so good, editors. I was walking down the stairs and I thought of a twist, and I literally went back upstairs and I wrote it. And so it's like, I feel really grateful to be edited. I think it's a really good thing. And it's maddening because you do want to be done, but it's really good to get help from other people.
Yeah. And a lot of times my agent has saved me from not editing stuff. Like, they have plenty of things to say in terms of change this, change that. Usually if you're spending years editing something, you learn to hate parts of it that you used to love, which is a big problem for me. So usually by the end of the process, I'm like, let's just change the entire last half of the book. And she's like, I think you need to just step away and watch some TV and just like hand over the book, right? So that they do that as well. They can kind of say, leave it alone, just let it be.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Sure, that'd be great.
Hello, Alison.
Hi. I know Chard. I know this man. We talked together, or we taught together for 10 years.
Yeah, at least. So I'm just very honored to have worked with Alison for at least 10 years at Providence College, which is a very rigorous college. The teaching schedule there is a killer. So I'm wondering if you could just talk a little bit about how you've been able to write and teach English and writing and literary journalism for over 10 years and write so much so successfully. And if the teaching and your students have influenced you at all as far as, your ideas and your writing and just the teaching process. And one more quick thing. I don't know if this has been mentioned, but they're doing a movie, aren't they?
They are, yes.
TriStar is coming out with a movie of the wedding people.
Yes.
Pretty soon.
Well, I haven't heard that last part. Pretty soon.
Okay, it's coming out at some point.
Pretty soon in
So
Hollywood
I just wanted
terms
to
is
let
5 to
people
10
know that
years.
that's going to be happening, and it's going to be very exciting. Thank you.
Well, this is an interesting question coming from a poet who also taught and confessed to me that he wrote poems while driving home to Vermont in the car, not like in an audio, like actually writing. And I was like, that's how productive we're supposed to be. Like, we can't even just drive. We've got to write poems while we drive. So I think I learned from the best in that for many years while teaching full time, you just find the hours in the morning, waking up at, 6 to 9, I'm going to write, and then I'm going to start prepping for class, and then I'm going to go to class, or vice versa, later at night. I spend a lot of weekend times writing. I also have started to think of vacations as time to write and work, which if you can find the people who also see vacation in that way, it's so fun. If you go on vacation with regular people, they're like, we're supposed to be kayaking, we're supposed to be, swimming, doing things. So it's really just finding that extra time, which is harder and harder to do, I think. I used to have a lot more energy for it, and now I really have to do like small little increments, like I'm going to do just 1 hour today. That's it. I used to put a lot of pressure on myself to use any free time, which I found kind of self-defeating over the course of my time teaching at Providence College. Students, I think they, remind you, as a novelist, I don't know if you feel this way, like you can kind of get caught up in like, well, what's the next big idea, and I try to brainstorm like what the big plot is going to be. And then you go into a class and, a student reads a passage from a story that they really loved. And I'm like, why did you like it? And they're like, I don't know. The words here are just so cool. And I'm like, oh yeah. Yeah. Like language is beautiful. And they're in a different headspace as young writers. Like they're just reading a one killer line can like send them soaring or something, and I think it's harder for me to feel that way sometimes as someone who's always like trying to put out a book. So they're always reminding me of like the little things, the tiny joys of just not trying to embark on a big project, but just their relationship with the words on the page. So that's always very inspiring to me.
Thanks. I'll just say really quickly, I don't teach, and so I edit novels on the side, and I think teaching is really, I'm always so impressed by writers who can teach and write at the same time, and I also feel the same way about vacation, by the way, and sometimes...
We should go on vacation.
We should go on vacation, or sometimes holidays. My daughter will go off with her father, and sometimes I do like my best writing on like Christmas, which is so bizarre, but it's just different. Yeah. Okay.
You and then you.
Okay.
Okay. Okay.
When did you know that you were a writer and how? For both. When did you know you were a writer and how?
Okay, so the question is, when did Alison and Marcy each know they were a writer, and how did this knowledge come to them?
Yep. So I was a little kid who was always just reading and reading and reading and reading. And, in elementary school, I had a teacher who had us like write short stories, and then she would type them on a typewriter. And I think one of my stories was like 20 pages. She was so almost annoyed with me. She's like, Marcy, this is too long for me to type. But she typed it up and she bound it. And, I still have it. I drew a cover. So you think I always really knew that. Like I always just didn't want to be anything else. And then after college, I got a job for a while, I think I already mentioned. And then I went to writing school. And so, that's my story. I always wanted to be a writer.
Yeah, I never thought I would be a writer professionally.
Yeah.
Mostly because no one presented that as an idea that was good. Like it was always like, oh, you'll be. My dad told me. I think this was after I published my first book. He was like, I'm trying to remember. At some point when I was younger, he was like, I know what you're going to be. And I was like, what is it? Tell me. And he's like, well, I can't tell you because then you're not going to be it. So he's like, I'll write it down on a little piece of paper and we'll like check back in when it's, pretty settled. And I was like, okay, that sounds fun. And he showed me at some point, like after I published one of my first books, and he had written a lawyer. I was like, sorry, Dad. And so like he's like, and I said, why? And he's like, just because of the way your brain works. Like, and I think the overlap between lawyer and writer is really, and lawyer and novelist is like not too far apart. And so I think I always was like, okay, I have a writing brain, but how can I channel that into lucrative professions? And that was really how I thought until end of college, when a professor said, you could go to graduate school for this. Even then, I still thought, I can go to graduate school for it. Like, I'm not going to be a writer. Like, it was just the thing I always did, the thing I loved to do the most. But it's amazing how often I had to be encouraged to go down that path professionally for me to actually start to see myself as a writer. I think it wasn't until I published the first novel that I really felt comfortable saying I'm a writer, which I think is silly. Like, I think if you're writing and you're whatever, you're a writer. But for me, I don't think I could say it out loud until about then. And then I thought, okay, this is where I'm going to try to make my life, even though I had been writing as a little kid.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, I think we have time for one more question. Do you want to? I think, no, I'm looking at you.
When you were talking about time, I was wondering, is she first child?
Oh, I forgot I was pregnant for like 45 minutes. No, it's okay. That's right. Yeah, it is. Yes. Yeah. Yeah, I know. I'll have a lot less time, I hear. Yeah, I'm like furiously trying to finish a manuscript before, but that's not working. I have dreams of being able to watch the baby sleep and write a novel. I don't know. No.
I can tell you.
Is that how it worked out for you, Marcy?
Well, with my novel Bad Marie, it was finished. I sold it. I had edits to do, and I literally kind of finished the edits and turned them in. And then I went into labor 2 weeks early after I had turned in the manuscripts, but I went to the hospital and I was like, no, I'm not ready. I haven't fixed the nursery yet. And I actually demanded, I was like, I have to go back home because I haven't done my nursery. And they're like, it's fine. So anyway, it is a mad rush and it just works out. People with babies, we write and it gets a little harder and then it's great.
Okay, well, that sounds promising.
Yeah.
Okay, please help me thank our two wonderful authors. That was really great. Thank you, guys.